Welcome everybody to Precog Time number 33. Is that right? With Cristobal Cea. We're really happy to be talking with you today, and you've been a friend of the magazine now for a number of years, but it's a real treat for us to get to talk with you about your work, what you've been making, and what your life has been like um, for the past year and beyond. I don't know. Yeah, so what's your quarantine been like? And what's it been like to make art?
Period one was amazing. When it was kind of bad because I was renting a studio. I was just starting to rent a studio, and basically I couldn't use it. But it was like exciting. We were talking a bit before this, but everything was kind of different. I got, but then I got tired of the you have to transform, reinvent yourself, which I think was kind of a global thing. So stage two of the pandemic, I really can't take it anymore.
What's the distinction? Like when did stage two start? Was it like 10 minutes after stage one? No, I'm just teasing.
Well, after summer, I guess. I mean, we had like
Yeah.
we had quarantine, and besides, like here we have a like Chile is a country that I don't know why, but we're kind of obsessed with control.
Mm.
So like we have funny facts, right? Or not that funny. Spaghetti and flour are like fortified by law, so they get added vitamins and stuff since, like, I don't remember exactly, but I think the 1930s or 40s, which is like sounds okay. Then you have fluoride in the water. Okay, sounds good, but at the same time it's kind of like assuming that people don't eat well or that you don't brush your teeth, and that mentality with the quarantine has been kind of crazy. I mean, we've been under curfew for, like, I don't remember how many months, like 15, 16. And we had that thing about a brief prohibition of televisions and entertainment, so you could only buy food and baby clothes, but no TVs. Which
But
I
if
don't.
you if you had a TV, you could still use it. You just couldn't purchase a
You
new
could sell
one.
it on the black market,
Okay.
like drugs. uh, but at the same time, I mean, I'm still baffled by that. But I went to a supermarket. I told you a little while ago. I saw like plush toys being tied up. Super sad. Uh, and and the issue of like televisions being prohibited, and PlayStations, and there is a, like, right now, like, this is a moment where you have PlayStation Pro, right? So it's not just entertainment. Some people make a living out of that. So when do you define when something is essential or not? And I'm sorry, but no, that was insane. That was really depressive.
And you
Luckily
start
they didn't forbid Netflix, but
So you talked a little bit, and this is sort of in some of the, we had a little bit of a back and forth before this conversation, but when you talk about like the prohibitions and the fluoride, you talk about it in relationship to a kind of lack of trust. The idea that there's this sort of social distrust, which is exemplified in, like, the government not trusting us to brush our teeth or something like this. And so
yes.
I'm wondering, and it seems like this question around like the trustworthiness, or like the authority apparatus as distrustful, seems like it's something that's like sideways important to to your approach to making art as well. So I was wondering if maybe you could talk a little bit about trust. I know that's not a question that we asked you at the beginning, but it seems like it's kind of there.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. I mean, it's a hugely important point. I mean, I think that it doesn't make sense if you can't trust people. Uh, so remember that you asked me, for instance, about teaching and stuff, and I love to, like, teach and make art. But what I like about teaching is that I'm not I teach everything I know, uh, because I trust that people will make better things with that than what I can do. And if you have a society built on like where you're always worried about the issue, I mean, to make a caricature of that here is that um, the feeling that you're always thinking about the exception. So I don't know. No, you have to forbid the televisions because people are going to be lazy. They're not going to work. That you have to put the curfew because people are going to get drunk and are going to party. So like that idea of being scared, kind of paranoid toward people having fun, and always thinking the worst. It does the worst.
But then does
So
that mean that there's a lot of illegal parties, or is it impossible?
I mean, yeah, because in the end you can't enforce that. Uh, like I mean, the quarantine, like this month's quarantine has been a joke. It's very scholar. I mean, scholar in like high school. How do you say that? Like collegiate, but kind of like childish.
Mm.
But people just go out because you can't humanly you can't enforce that. It's like if you have a culture where you don't trust. I mean, a lot of bad things happen. That has been kind of universal, right? Like with the cops, has been a problem everywhere where you don't have like
Over policing.
right because you are acting on predictions that are based on prejudices or because you. I mean, if you think that things are gonna go wrong, this is like a universally human tendency, right? We want to be right. We like to say I told you so. That always happens. But if your I told you so is these people are lazy, stupid, then you are going to enforce that because you want to be right. If you like with the policing thing, if you have a prejudice of something to validate your actions, you are going to try. But like it's a case of the chicken and the egg, kind of.
And Cristobal, sorry, I'm just gonna ask a question just so if anyone doesn't know about your work, like maybe could you talk a little bit about making digital work and how you started and how like being in the pandemic has like either reinforced, like are you like I love making digital or now you're like because you also do paintings and all
I do
these other kinds of
paintings.
things, so you're like I want to do the opposite, I want to get away from the computer. But
I
talk
actually,
about your like origin story.
well, I wanted to be, I thought that being an artist was basically being a painter, like when you run into someone on the street and they're like, what you do? I'm an artist. And it's like, oh, what? So you do sculpture, you do painting? And you go like, oh, okay, here we go again. I do sculpture. What kind of sculpture do you do? Marble? Bronze? No, well, it's complicated, right?
Takes
I wanted to be a painter. I thought that it was all about painting. I wanted to paint nice stuff. Um, and then I went out of school. Like I started to like get away from it to find my own way to paint. And then I got out of school and I thought like I had like some sort of realization that it wasn't a very free medium because it was like it had such a huge weight and I just needed more time. And I started, and I don't know why. Like the first show I had after college was because I was obsessed with like CAD language, like the vernacular of digital culture in a way, sort of like using SketchUp to make murals because it had an authority, like a visual authority that allowed you to fantasize and like to play with what architecture means and stuff like that. But I still had, and I did a lot of like 3D for proposing exhibitions, but I was still kind of torn between like, I want to be a painter and I'm doing these things in a medium that I didn't recognize as art. Like I was doing the proposals in like 3D rendering. And then I did like, and then I remember that I made the Hawker Hunted piece, and that was the first time that I thought like, okay, this could be an end in itself. Um, I remember a friend of mine, Nicolas Rupsic. He's also a Chilean artist, but he was the first person I remember that there was like, oh my, like After Effects is something that is like as artistic as a painting. And then I sort of never looked back, but I'm gonna make a brief pause. This is kind of ironic. But I made a lot of work that had to do with like digital stuff and things like that. But I've never been very comfortable like doing only one thing. So for instance, I mean quarantine stuff, like I started painting stuff again. But it's kind of ironic because I started painting visions of the sky, uh, and I live in an apartment, right? But I don't have sky, but I really like clouds. And this hill is called Provincia Hill. It's very nice. Um, and I spend my Sundays there. But I've been trying to integrate I've always trying to integrate like real material stuff with digital stuff because I not much of a avant-garde person.
One thing which is interesting, even about the way that you're talking about this integration, like there's a lot of people will often talk about like how digital forms can be haunted, or how like there is a certain sense of like real materiality haunting the structures of digital forms.
Mm,
Um, and you also use a lot of ghosts in your work. There are a lot of haunted objects, and then actual haunted objects, haunted histories, and then actual almost cartoonish representations of sheets,
mm.
as though it was over a body in the form of a ghost. So I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about ghosts and haunting in your work.
Sure. I moved to I was very scared of ghosts as a kid. The first thing I wanted to my first costume was a Ghostbuster, not because I love the Ghostbusters, but because I wanted them to actually like
Go away.
do their stuff. Like I don't know, I was really, really, really scared out of ghosts. And I told you before that I had like the spookiest nightmares. I had some weird dream about a ghost with a sheet without legs coming to, like, you know, those dreams where you dream that you wake up, like augmented reality dreams, so to speak.
Hmm.
And I was very little, and I had this uh, sh- sheet ghost coming at me in the middle of the night when I woke up with a lion that was not a lion, but the costume of a lion, kind of like the Wizard of Oz. And in their five fingers, they had like thimbles, I think, are the things for sewing.
Hmm.
And they came and they tickled me, and that it was very recurrent. And when they tickled me, I peed myself every time. Stop wetting the bed. Um, and then it happened when I was in New York. I remember that I started working with news clips, or in Providence. I don't remember. I think it was in Providence. And I realized, and these news clips, this work with news clips was about like remediating the news, like making them again. The best way to illustrate it, I had this work called Ghosts of a Mother Grieves for Her Son, that I received this email about from Venezuela, and they were asking me in 2014, like, would you like to present some work about politics and urbanism? And I saw the email and I thought, damn it, I mean, I'm living in New Haven. My wife has a scholarship. I don't I cannot know. I mean, the distance between me and Venezuela is huge. And then I went for a news clip to, like, I wonder, well, what is going on there? And I saw this 1-minute news clip of a university student that got shot and her mother weeping. And it was like, okay, no, the depth of that situation is so painful. I cannot presume to represent it. And it was a 1-minute news clip of the BBC. And at the time I was teaching film animation video at RISD. And the thing that I was a bit obsessed was this technique called motion tracking. Match moving, sorry, which is basically like machine vision applied for a computer to understand, to extract a 3D scene from live action footage. It's the way they put like Gollum interacting with Frodo and stuff. And I thought, well, what if normally in movies they do that with very good footage, but I thought, well, it would be nice to apply this to news clips, as to use this tool that is normally used to create entertainment as a tool to extract, to get deeper into this story. And it was a very long process because news footage is not meant to be motion tracked. Normally people have like markers and stuff. So it's really hard and it's extremely slow. And I realized after a while that some of the shots that were 5 seconds took me like a week or 2. That if you look long enough into a shot, it will sort of haunt you back. And I got like really interested in the role of the witness, like the contemporary witness, because now you witness through phones, right? And it's kind of insane that the only remnant of your physical body when you are documenting, witnessing, like you become testimony, and you as a body, as a physical body, you disappear. In order to become testimony, and the only remnant of your physicality is the motion of the camera. And out of that's a lot of information of like trying to inhabit the gap. And then I started working with that in New York. I worked in this one that was called Ghost of Concordia, and Ghost of Concordia took me a long time. I was like doing 7 jobs at the time, so tiny bitty. And I started seeing stuff from the news clip in the street. So that one I mix footage that I like, I don't know, I was in my studio and I saw a tree in the same position that it was in the tree. And it wasn't just like whatever tree, it was like in the news clip of Concordia, and there was a Christmas tree standing on the corner of a fence. And in front of my studio, there was a Christmas tree standing in the corner of a fence. So it was like, oh my, like if you let news footage haunt you back, or news haunt you back, you start to realize that they are not just happening there, they are happening here too. So it's an issue of distance. And then the ghost appeared. Like in a way, they appear in Hawker Hunted too, like as the cloth simulation it has. But here was like I tried in order to get deeper into the story, like you start to like sort of sympathize with the people of the news. And you start to imitate their movements like naturally, kind of like what we were talking of, like people socializing, but through video.
Gabby, do we have a clip of that?
We don't. We have other clips which we can show, and if it's on your website, I can pull it up. But
because I think it would be good to see a little bit of the actual video.
Of that video?
Or any what's the ghost? What do we have?
We don't have we have some of the pumping, the organs pumping, and the transitional kid video. But I can't.
Maybe the transitional kid.
Okay. I'll start with that, and then I'll see if we can do something else as well.
Okay.
You know the weirdest thing about the ghost though, that it then became kind of like a meme thing.
Acá ahora yo estoy en Miami. Miami es súper Yo tengo tantas ganas de ir. Mi mamá fue el año pasado, yo creo que por eso tengo ganas de ir, porque fue el año pasado, el 91, no me acuerdo, y se ganó un sorteo en la oficina. Ella trabaja en la Chile, es secretaria, y fueron con todas las amigas, incluyendo la Jessica, que ahora ya no la puede ver, y fueron a hartas partes, fueron a la playa y fueron al Outlet Mall. Y se trajo las bolsas del Outlet Mall, que eran súper bonitas porque eran con un cocodrilo verde, y me contó que tenían todas las cosas que habían acá, y había muchas más cosas, pero además eran más baratas. Y se trajo unas zapatillas verdes, que es súper raro porque acá todas las zapatillas son grises. Que allá hay muchas más cosas. En Miami hay muchas más cosas.
That was true. Now we have the same things. Whew. That's a ghost of myself, basically. Like
That's
once,
you when you're younger, right? Like remembering.
yeah, I made I had this other, like when I moved back, I wanted to like the whole news clip thing. Like I thought it was a kind of like a narrative problem. How do you tell stories that in a way exist in a world where you have just too many stories? And one of those stories was about, like, I realized, because I became really, like, I made a habit and practice of recompiling and seeing news. And I thought, okay, I'm going to do two things. The first one is I'm going to check on news clips of floods for every day until I have like 4 years of footage. Because I have the intuition that if I look like every day of the year, there is a flood somewhere. And that in that relation, like, we are in effect experiencing a global flood, only that is moving around the world. But there's always one. And I would like to make a piece out of that, to visualize this flood, for which our, like, narrative traditional way of storytelling is insufficient. And I made like 2, 3, 4 years of like compiled of news footage of floods, and then like spontaneously I started to relate that with what it means to have like information overflow. And I remember when I was like 10 or something, which is the democratic transition in Chile. So you like switch from right-wing dictator, military dictator, towards what was, a lot of people in my circle said, like a socialist government, always afraid that it was going to be like a communist takeover or something. And paradoxically, it was like during Pinochet years, we didn't have, I don't remember having much stuff there. I mean, there was one brand of potato chips, one-way highways, and it was paradoxically very, like, doesn't sound like a right-wing thing. It wasn't liberal, at least for consumers. Probably because there was some sort of like boycott or whatever. And then when the socialist government came, I remember McDonald's coming in, and like toys, and like the dollar was like super cheap. So like it was like an explosion of consumption. And it was the same year, like around the same time that the Pope went, and a lot of stuff, and it was like too much to take over. So I made this character for the show that was sort of like trying to understand having too much information in the early 1990s. And I sort of played him as a fool, because I was a very, how do you say when you're not supposed to say?
What?
It's not prick, right? But I have an anecdote on that story where, like, I remember I used to come with my mother she was working as a secretary, and she told me in the home, oh, I don't like this colleague of mine. And then I went with her into an elevator, the colleague was there, and my mom was like, hi, Jessica, nice to see you. And I would like pull up her skirt and say, but you don't like this person. You told me, like, so I used to make that kind of stuff all of the time, and that was like the character of this kid. Like talking about, like, I don't know, we're so happy to have McDonald's, but we have cholera, so burgers don't have lettuce because it might have cholera, which is true fact, right? But it's like a very weird contradiction.
So could you talk a little bit in this, you know, like the connection between the news floods that you were looking at and this like metaphorical flood, or like the idea of the flood as a metaphor for dealing with information, history, etc., like provides this kind of continuity between like the material facts that you're looking at and how they like transform into like aesthetic like rubber bands that can connect some of your work or to other parts of your work. And when we were talking about your practice, we sort of were wondering what about an event, like a historical event or like a personal event, like draws you to it, right? Like why floods, right? Why floods? I mean, you were talking about ghosts and it's obviously very personal, but yeah, Flo and I were sort of, and Kelly were discussing like why you choose to reenact or represent the particular kinds of events that you do.
Yeah. Honestly, it's like the times I've done it, it's very anecdotal. And I mean, the first time in the Venezuela thing, it was just trying to be honest about acknowledging that there was an inconsolable distance between me and whatever I was trying to represent. And then when I started working with Argentina, I had the impression that sometimes like you don't have to start from a very developed idea to come into like a more profound conclusion. And with the floods of Argentina, it just touched me. But it touched me in the sense, and this is funny because you sort of forget it when you move back to the southern hemisphere, um, because you don't see, like, in a way, whenever you move to the US, a lot of countries become invisible. You only see certain floods, and other floods, although they are happening, you don't see them. I didn't saw, and you have news about like floods as a kind of news is very low. It's always very local. Like because they happen everywhere, but they are very local news. And when I saw the one about Argentina, like the image called me, I was kind of moved about the kid and the mother, and I was like thinking about how idiosyncratic they are. And then I started with the project of like, okay, let's take all of those local news, which sounds like kind of like 4chan channels, right? Very local communications, and try to make some sense out of it. I did discover some stuff. For instance, I don't know, probably because it happens in the summer, but people in Argentina tend to swim a lot in floods. Like I saw 2 or 3 floods where like people were playing in floods, and I didn't saw that in like news clips of floods in India. Floods in the US, naturally, so many drones, like too much droning, and people have so many boats. And I saw it's amazing. And then I just let the thing go from that, right? So I had like the project where it was like putting all together, and then trying to examine it. And then I run into a video of some kids in Hawaii, like this kind of like kidfluencer type kind of person. And they were like 3 kids sitting on a couch. They had a YouTube channel, probably they still have it, where they say like, hi, in today's video, like we're super cute, our house flooded, boo. And they all put like sad faces, and I thought it was horrific. Like, what kind of parents are these? And they said, I still remember they said, and what did you do? We went to the movies with our parents. And so it's very asymmetric, the way floods are perceived. And in terms of information, it was very obvious that I couldn't, it's a problem that you can't describe. And then I come back to that question that you said about the event. Events are very difficult to describe when they happen. It's kind of like Zizek has this analogy that is kind of like falling in love. You fall in love when you already did. That's why it's called falling, right? I fell in love. Oops, there, right? And a lot of events are like that. I mean, they are like events are just the sum of causes that you didn't understand when they were happening. And I thought that there was some relation between that, and because floods, like the flood, right, the global flood, I did some research on like mythical floods too. The flood is about forgetting, like in at least, especially in the Judeo-Christian tradition. This like there are these like fascinating issues of language used that are kind of insane, which is a relation between saving and remembering, because the figure of God never saves Noah or whatever. I checked it. It was like, and then he remembered. And remembering was equal to saving, and you still have that in your computer, right? I'm going to save, like, you don't think I'm going to save the file as like I'm gonna save the file. No, you it's not a very heroic thing. And then I saw like some relations, right? It's about how do you understand remembering, how do you let yourself forget, because you had to forget sometimes. So I started that show actually with a news clip from the Apple Developers Conference of 2006, where I don't remember the person. He was promoting Time Machine, and I saw that in college when I wanted to be a painter, right? And I saw it in college, and it was like, he said something like, if I lose a single one of these photos, I would be very sad. But if I lose my hard drive, I would be devastated. I never ever want to lose a single one of my memories ever. I was like, okay, guys, no, just you're losing the ability to remember, in a sense that it's much more important, which is not, remember is about memory, not about archiving. It's about and the root of the word, I love that, but the root is to pass again through the heart. At least in Spanish is recordar, which is recordos is heart again. But if your memory is something, it's on a hard drive, you're not remembering, you're accessing.
In some ways, it sort of sounds like it would be like mistaking the organ for its function or something like this, or assuming that the organ is like that the brain is just a location and not something that also thinks.
Yeah.
Which sort of transitions in some metaphorical way into some current work that you're making around these kind of disembodied pulsating organs, and like this introduction of the body as somewhat dismembered or stripped bare and mechanical. So I'm going to show a little bit of a clip, and then maybe you can talk to us about some of those ideas as well. So I guess the keep pumping is earlier, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was very happy during the lockdown, and I was developing a habit of doing like drawing, doodling, fun conversations with people. This has a very like standard. I had a show I had a show coming in October, and my dad got like the COVID thing, and he's 80 years old, so we rushed him to the hospital, and no one thought that he was actually sick, like that sick. And in the hospital, they were like, dude, this guy, I mean, probably not gonna make it. And they intubated him without me knowing, and of course, it has happened a lot to a lot of people this time, right? But I couldn't see him, and it was extremely hard. Uh, and I remember that I think that art has some sort of function about, I mean, at least to me, I love, it's about bridging cultures, distances, issues. And in that sense, I think that what happened was that, I mean, I remember that I thought about my dad and the whole issue that happened to a lot of persons, right? Like you had to mourn either because someone died, passed away, or because uh, you couldn't physically enact pain. It needs to happen outside of you. We had like so many private mornings, and within that space, and without being able to see him, like his body became very abstract. And I started thinking like about the body and questions such as like how long it is a body. And I found out that a body, like if you extend all of the DNA particles, like proteins in a body, and put it in line, it's 2 times the Milky Way. So imagine if you like, I was like, damn it. I mean, if you take all of the DNA of all the living things on Earth, probably like we'll get to the Big Bang, which is almost cheesy to think that actually like you have infinity within you, but you do. And I started like describing the body of my dad. Because I made a drawing of the body of my dad as something that was just breathing because it needed to breathe, whose only function was like, you call the hospital and then say like, okay, saturation is whatever, blah, 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 the numbers are, et cetera, et cetera. So it's kind of like living by wire, right? Because I was just asking about lungs, liver, and not the skin. And I dreamt an image of the first image I had of this. I made a painting out of that, but the image was like this organism, disembodied organism, stubbornly trying to survive, even though of course you're not going to survive if you don't even have a body. It's like, okay, don't. And I started thinking about, and I put it on a landscape, and it sort of eventually became an image for stubbornness. And I realized my father is a very conservative person, that I don't know, he can't understand, for instance, that people like gaming is a profession now. He just can't understand that. And I realized that a lot of the world was kind of like existing on just how do you say when someone functions because it's just out of habit, inertia. Like that there was like inertia, like that body wasn't the body, probably wasn't the body of my father, but was the body of a lot of institutions that are functioning because they're functioning. And so like that video that you showed now, it's kind of an expansion of that. The first painting was like more, I showed it to my father afterwards, like, Dad, I made a portrait of you. He didn't like it that much. But I'm glad you're alive. But then I've been expanding, thinking of this issue of the disembodied body as something that like in a way, like as a character, as something that has to do with inertia, like a body for an institution that is invisible, kind of like a Voldemort, right? I love horror. And at the same time, in a way that we relate to social media, that you are in many places at the same time, and sometimes you just can't take it. I mean, your LinkedIn profile is not your Instagram person.
Well, actually, I wanted to ask you about you were like someone tried to steal your identity recently.
Yeah, but
you think it was like a troll farm? So it was like some like artificial, some like bot?
I think it was a bot.
Okay.
Because I got giddy. I got like followed by Huyon, which is this company that makes tablets, and I received a message that said like, "Hey, so you've been selected to win a tablet for only fill this thing," and I didn't fill the form, but I did open it. So
And then,
probably then the bot said like, "Okay, this is a fool.
let's get him.
Let's get him." And a lot of people answer me, and that was so like within this scenario of mental surrealism. A lot of people were like very saying like, "Oh, you're famous," and I'm like, "Oh, dude, I'm an artist." I mean, like, if followers were like an important thing, I mean, a measure of value, like we will be like so poor. An artist college teacher, I mean, below Hades, below Hades. No.
And then another question. So you also like, I think it's kind of funny, like on your website, you always post all your old statements and you're like, oh, which is really nice because I feel like as artists, we're always like, oh, I have to apply. What do I say? And then you're, you're like kind of adjusting a little bit. But also you published this like response to a newspaper editorial, and the editorial was like how like contemporary artists were trying to destroy like Western civilization, which I think is really funny. But because it's like really like what can art do, the like, is art powerful, that powerful, so can you talk a little bit about your response?
Yeah, everything that happens there happens here. I mean, at least, I mean, Chile is a very Americanized country, and the US has worked very hard for that. Including issues like culture wars. And it's, I mean, like personally embedded that, and it just pissed me. I know, I mean, it's normal. It happens in Spain. It happens everywhere that there has been this issue about like art. Like once, I mean, 10 years ago, the only way you could validate yourself as an artist, I'm kind of exaggerating, but it would be through college, through art magazines, through galleries and museums. Those were like the four things that would make you. And with social media and now with the pandemic, this, like, it became absolutely obvious that there are different ways to work as an artist, and you don't have to be validated by these four institutions. Like, I don't know, you can make a wonderful living out of painting stuff on Instagram that probably an art museum, MoMA, would never ever take, not even if you have more followers than people on Earth. Which is interesting, right? Because you have like a concept like the world as being decentered in a way. Like MoMA was like avant-garde in the sense that it tried to be a center, and that thing survived until like 15 years ago. And naturally, within that context, it appeared, I've been noticing, because I love following weird stuff, but I've been noticing that a lot of artists realized, consciously or unconsciously, artists that were not validated by traditional arts media, that, you know what, I'm doing better than people that are like in museums. And some of these persons became very saw a complot, like a conspiracy. Like, this means that, which is this weird thing between art and talent. If I can't, like, art as an issue of performance, and all of these like weird little habits that I very much enjoy, and look like there's people doing time lapses of painting canvases, or photos of persons like dressed as painters with brushes, and which is great. It's okay, but in some of those cases it became weaponized. And this was one of those cases. So you have like a newspaper that is very conservative, but at the same time extremely influential. It's not like Fox News. It's kind of like the mutant child between Fox News and the New York Times. That's like El Mercurio.
Journal.
Yeah, and Mercurio is like, I mean, the owner that passed away like 2 years ago, like, I mean, he made arrangements for the military coup of 1973. And until the 1990s, for instance, if someone like someone that was killed during their dictatorship, the newspaper didn't acknowledge until the 90s that this person was killed. They used the word presumed disappeared all the time. So within this newspaper that has the only art supplement left, that is like dwindling, they published this thing on the same page where there were some news about graffiti in downtown Santiago. So it's like you're calling for people to get angry. And I read the thing, and I've lived in the US for some time, and I have friends there, and I have friends from I have a lot of friends that are like extremely right wing. I don't know if it's of morbosity or whatever, but I recognize all of the arguments. Like there's it was an article that was written by that was evidently asked for, where they said that there was a conspiracy against beauty, which was promoted by a group of Marxist teachers, philosophers, and the whole thing of like you ask a right-wing person about the media and is going to say, oh, it's dominated by the left, and you ask a left-wing person about the media, is oh, it's possessed by the right, like the same thing. And I was really sad that it was published in an influential newspaper, because I met someone, actually, I talked to my dad, and he said, well, they might be right. And I thought, whoa, if he's thinking this. And then I just looked at the thing, and I saw that they said that everything, like the argument was that, it was so insane. The argument was that after the abolition, after the abolition of that, the Academy of Fine Arts of France was abolished. The Royal Academy of Fine Arts in France was abolished in 1789 with the end of the monarchy. But what actually but they don't mention that what happened was that, of course, you can't have a Royal Academy of Art if you just beheaded the king. So what actually happened was that they changed the name and it became the Academy of Art. But just like 3 years later, dude, I mean, it's the French Revolution. But I don't know, it didn't make any sense. And I just wrote that, dude, I mean, this is not a time about centers, and it doesn't make any sense to insist that things are going to be so hegemonic again.
Yeah, well, I wanted to ask one last question, and then if anyone has questions, you want to send it into the chat to Gabby, and then we'll send them over to Cristobal. But I wanted to ask about the class that I took, the América Imaginaria, because that's kind of like related to work you're working on now, right? Because
yeah,
I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about, because then I thought it was really interesting the way you taught it, because you're teaching this program that's like Blender, it's like animation, learning how to make digital things, but you also had reading about these imaginary creatures. And yeah, if you want to talk a little bit about that and how you develop your teaching style.
I out of a grudge, I always have the impression that like arts have been seen as a lesser way of thinking, not a smart thinking. Bye, Myra. And I just don't agree. I think that like art, pictures, painting, drawing are just different ways of thinking, and it can be extremely much more profound than text. So I've always thought that you could make classes that are that I like my classes to be how to think by doing, and how to make a dialogue between what you are, like a conversation between text and making. I mentioned someone some years ago, like he asked me that, and I told him that I thought that it was important to realize that ideas also have sex, and that there is a sexuality between different ways of thinking too. that if you only think in one way, you're on like it's going to end like the European royalty, right? Like everyone, it's homophilic. So that has been something that has driven my teaching a lot. And what happened with that workshop was that I've been doing like running tests on how to teach because circumstances are different. And I like to teach what I'm making, and to understand teaching as opening. I've been experimenting with understanding teaching as a medium of art, as just another tool of creation that just so happens to be shared, and the class as a way to open a creative process, and to just come on, let's go to the art making party. And that's something that happened actually after we had the uprisings in 2019, and it was like all of the museums were closed. It was it was insane. Like we had like militaries on the street. I had tanks in front of my house, tear gas everywhere. But there was a lot of art, and the art that happened didn't have authors.
Mm.
And I remember that I distinctively that I saw a performance that I thought it didn't make any sense, because it was a performance that was trying to be it was like a traditional performance. So performances, I don't like performances that are representations of performances. So it was a performance with an author, which I saw that kind of critically, and I thought, no, this is like telling you what's the problem here, that whatever is going on, you need to create different habits of creation. And instead of like focusing on painting the next Guernica or making a big sign or like doing like something, I call it the bumper sticker culture of Twitter and Instagram, that you're sort of like replicate stuff, but you don't let the ideas actually go into you, and like you don't, it's not real dialogue, it's just replication. I thought I should just teach what I do that is relevant for this. This was in 2019, which is that I love photogrammetry. And I made this workshop with a colleague in college, Felipe Baiza, that was called Antes del Olvido. And the purpose was like, we need to capture what is going on, because maybe tomorrow they're gonna like take all of the graffiti out. You can't do that individually. The only way to do it is to design a strategy of like teaching, so that the tool to do the capture becomes viral. And we call that like a viral model of education. And in doing that, like we realized that it was absolutely possible to mix education with practice. That you didn't need to know something to teach something, just to be willing to do it. And actually now, for instance, for America Imaginaria, which was the workshop that you were such a great student, that you took for that workshop, the issue was an issue that I hadn't been able to resolve before, because I've always been obsessed with like monsters in maps, and I was like, okay, if I need to make a class, like if I need to make a class to start working on this, I'm gonna start by the class. And now, like I actually am proposing, I applied for a grant to give some free workshops on American Imaginaria, to create an installation that has different, like, because in that class, like the experiment also was like you made a lot of these characters, like the headless people of Guyana and stuff. And all of some of you uploaded those characters. And so I have like different versions of a single monster, which is great, because you like the idea of an army of people that are monstrous is, but proud, that are like reclaim their monstrosity. That's what I'm working on now. So hopefully that grant work. If it doesn't work, doesn't matter. I'm gonna have to teach the workshop.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting you're talking about the graffiti, because over here, what I noticed what happened, and maybe you think it's interesting, was that I think it's being co-opted by companies. So when they saw that there was like all the Black Lives Matter protests and the looting, they were like, oh, okay, let's board up our stores and tell people that they can come graffiti. That way they won't want to come destroy the store. And then there was all these like kids like drawing hearts and like, you know, flowers on top of like, I don't know, a shoe store. And then I was like, wow, they really took something radical and they made it like part of their brand, you know? So
Well,
I think
yeah.
that's kind of like an insane thing because that was the only, and it was like, oh, we'll make this an art piece, you know, like you have permission to do this or something, which I thought was really weird. I had never seen that before, like, you know, because before graffiti here was like a bad thing. Like everyone's like, oh, the subway used to be disgusting, and now it's like, oh yeah, come graffiti, just like, you know, and then it's all like, ah. It's like, what the hell is going on here, you know?
Well, I mean, you have, I mean, now if I need to buy really good spray paint, I
Yeah.
buy Montana.
Okay. Yeah.
I buy the graffiti stuff. I don't know. I think that is probably part of a very much broader like cultural process, but it has to do probably like one. It has many components, right? But with the idea of freedom, for instance, we have a company here that's called WOM, like a cell phone company, that it might be kind of like Virgin in the sense that it's like the hip company. And it's always advertises freedom. Like we give you free, like freedom in Spanish, freedom and is libre.
Like
So,
free, like
right.
like for not expense, not a charge, not charged.
There's like a good relation of like money and freedom. And well, this company uses freedom all the time. And when the protest started here, like they took them like 10 seconds to make a huge sign saying like we understand the cause or whatever, but but it sort of like has lost its sense, the word freedom, in a very contradictory way, right? Because for instance, I mean, all of stuff are like liberalized now. Instagram is funny, but like do you remember when Instagram was fun?
I know, and now it's very like I was laughing because I think like someone like maybe Kelly's boyfriend Pasquale posted a picture of trash, and I was like, oh cool, like I haven't seen someone just post like anything, you know. Usually it's like I was telling also Gabby, like everything is so curated that if you want to put something horrible or not that good, then it's like, what's wrong with you? You know?
Right? Yeah, like I would like to pay advertising of me, like me with a sad face saying like, please, like I need friends. But it was like, I remember, it's very hard for me to remember now, but when basically Instagram was when social networks were leisure.
Mm-hmm. And now it's like work, everything is about, and like all these things are also like your Facebook is connected to your Instagram, and yeah, there's like different kinds of profiles. So like in LinkedIn, your portrait is gonna be like a little more serious. Mm-hmm. But then it's in Instagram, it's gonna be like maybe a little fun, and then like, you know, there's like these 3 different layers, but you're always the same person. It's like, who's your audience or something? Like you have to be aware. And like I think before, when internet was like becoming more of like everyone had the internet, it was like more anonymous. And like you would be like, oh, I'm just gonna put this on, no one cares, or like, you know, like no one's gonna find this and then it's not gonna affect my job, it's not, you know.
Yeah. And it was very
like Tumblr, like you could just like save all these terrible things and like no one would be like, oh, you did that, you know. Now there's also like a lot of fear about like, oh, what are you, you know, who, like everything you do is like a representation online is a representation of who you are,
right?
And maybe your ethics or something, you know.
It's very hard to manage. Yeah, but the weird thing too is that, I mean, so basically all of this media was leisure at a time, but leisure is what free people have. The weird thing is that now you have this contradiction where because it has become very transparent now, like sort of like a, uh, I don't know, Hansel and Gretel. I'm gonna cook you, boys. It's kind of like Hansel and Gretel, right? Hey, come on to the house. You're gonna meet your friends from college, and you're never gonna talk back to them again. But now it's very transparent that it's work, and the contradiction is that you have kind of like with Uber, right? You have people that in order to make Instagram work, you have to work all the time for Instagram. You have to upload stuff all the time. You have to be always running to the cliff, kind of. So you have that paradox where it's the same case with Uber. You have the paradox of being free, and at the same time, in a fantastic issue, kind of like you have this Marxist problem of alienation and factories. Like I'm free to work on the factory, so you have a conflation of Saint Augustine and Marx. I'm free to choose my own chains, and I choose to work as a slave on the factory of this. And that's kind of like, it's, I don't know how do we get out of that.
Yeah.
Well,
It's true.
that's a really like appropriate question to end on, I think, formally. So thank you so much for talking about your work with us, and I hope everyone can hang out for a little bit and just keep talking with Cristobal and see how we all are.